Hi, Valerie Dawn here. Today we're finishing the quilting on the Spring Roses quilt. In this step-by-step tutorial, I'll guide you through basic ruler work to outline the stars and log cabins with straight stitch lines. Next, I'll show you how to create free motion feathers and circle stippling. I'll also walk you through some quilting math to plan a piano keys and feather border using a straight ruler. This video wraps up my three-part series on designing, piecing, and quilting the Spring Roses quilt. You can find the full playlist linked in the description below. This is a wall hanging I made with the spare pieces, and I just wanted to show you the layers because I've put this together the same as the quilt. There's the backing, then there's a thin layer of cotton batting that is not going to shrink, and there is a high loft polyester, and then the quilt top. Now I'm just going to set this aside to show you the pattern I've chosen. The feathers are free motion. The quilting in the white patches is very dense because what I want to do is make the white patches recede so that the log cabin strips show up and create a lot of nice interest in texture. I'm also using a straight edge ruler, and I use that to keep a straight line on this 1/4 inch stitching line inside the hunter star, and I'm also using it to do a stitch in the ditch around the light colored patches. This is, I suppose you'd call it a type of stippling pattern, but it's a loop inside a loop, and they're really kind of fun to do. This is a westerly ruler foot. It's going to measure exactly 1/4 inch, so I can use it to judge when I stitch lines that they're 1/4 inch lines. Now, let me just drop the needle and pull the bobbin thread up. That's going to save a world of nuisance later, because if I bring the bobbin thread up, it doesn't get tangled up in all of the stitching on the back of the quilt. Alright, and I also lower the needle so that whenever I stop, it's in the down position and I don't lose my positioning. Okay, this ruler has 1/4 inch marks right here. So, and my foot is going to measure 1/4 inch from the edge to the needle. I hold my ruler right here along the edge. This foot, you have to make sure it's positioned low enough so that it doesn't jump over the top of this ruler, which is 1/4 inch, but high enough that it will clear some of these seams that have a lot of bulk because of the selvage on the other side. Now let me just line this up to the edge. Gently make sure my ruler foot is leaning against it, and you don't have to hold this really in a very tight grip. It will stay in place with a light bit of pressure. Okay, let's start. And I stop with the foot right here. Reposition the ruler and keep stitching until one edge of my foot touches this line and the other touches this seam. Okay. And that's where I'll stop. Now it's a little awkward for me to put the ruler on this side from where I'm positioned. I'm going to put it on this side, and so long as this, I can lean against the ruler to keep the straight edge, but so long as this side of the foot follows this seam where the patches come together, it'll be the right 1/4 inch width. This takes a little bit of practice. Once you get the hang of it, it's loads of fun. And then I've finished this patch, and I will move on and do the others. Alright, the next thing I'm doing is free motion feathers. And I'm new at these, so we can learn together. I've stitched 1/4 of an inch inside all the way around, and I don't have a lot of space in this sewing machine, so I need to reposition when I run out of room here. Alright, now I'm going to use my ruler to travel back down here so I can do the feathers on the other side. Alright, I'm ready to do the feathers on this side. Remember to bring the bobbin thread up to the top or it'll get all tangled in the bottom threads, which is a great nuisance. Just gently use your, I use a seam ripper to just pull that up. I like to tie in the ends as I go because I don't like to finish the quilt top and then have to go back and tie in all these threads. But I want to show you the tool that you didn't know you needed. This is a needle with a large loop at the end rather than an eye. And this is amazing for tying these threads in. Because all you need to do is bring your needle in where the threads are. Feed this through the quilt sandwich. And then bring your threads through that nice big loop and pull them all through. And then snip them up. And be careful you don't snip the fabric. I'm just putting my hand on the back of the quilt to make sure that I don't accidentally feed it through the back and all of the threads are hidden inside. For the pattern in the light colored squares, the first thing we do is a stitch in the ditch all the way around the outside of each block. I do that with the ruler. You just have to go slow. Now position it about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the block. And then slowly follow the edge of the fabric so that you're trying not to stitch on top of it, just right where the two seams come together. That's called stitch in the ditch. That part's done. Now I'm going to do the free motion part, which is circles within circles, loops. And the other thing I'm going to do is make sure I stop down at this corner so I don't have to break the thread. I can just keep going on this block. Then I just, with my ruler, continue on this block. This is the quilt design I applied to the border. I'm going to show you a little bit of math of how you mark this onto the quilt so that all of the triangle designs are equally spaced across the border. Let's start with Electric Quilt 8 because this is my quilt design. I'm looking at the borders tab, so it's showing me all the borders that I have. I've highlighted the inside border, which is the 3/4 inch dark rose border. It's telling me that it is 58 by 58, and that tiny little fraction is really not significant. That tells me that from this point here over to here is 58 inches. So I need to decide how many triangles do I want to fit in here so that they're just about the right size. I have drawn the design to scale on some graph paper. This line is the quilt top space. This band right here is the dark rose border, and then this is the floral border here. And it's about finished. It'll be about 4 3/4 inches. Now it's a little wider than that, but as you quilt, this line here gets a little bit messy, and you end up cutting some of it off after you're done to trim it and bind it. So when I do the math, if I look at 58, if I add 8 triangles, each one will be 7 1/4 inches wide. That's from here to here. If I make 9 triangles, that's 6.44 inches. That's close to 6 1/4. And you never get these exactly on. You just have to kind of adjust them a little bit as you go. It's not an exact science. That would be this width. And if I had 10 triangles, they'd each be 5.8 inches, which is close to 5 3/4. So they'd be about that size. I've chosen the 9 because that makes it about 3 inches in here. That's just about enough space for me to do the free motion feathers inside. And then I just line my triangle up so that it's straight along that edge, and then I just drew around it here and here. Now I liked that because I said it gives me about enough space to do my feathers inside. If I had gone with the 7 1/4, that's that mark right there, that would put it about, if I line this up straight, that would bring my triangles up to this level. Now I found that a little bit too close to the edge, and I wanted a bit of space in there so my piano key stitches show up. And if I made it 10, the 5.8, which is about here, that makes that space inside a little tinier and not quite as much space to put the feathers. So I decided 9 across the border was just about right. I have these lines drawn on my graph paper. The next thing I'm going to add in is this 1/4 inch echo line. I have a ruler here that does that very easily for me. I'm going to draw this on carefully here, and I'm going to stop right there. I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. Alright, and then I'm going to do the same thing here just so I'll see how it turns out. That is my echo line, and then I'm going to add the piano keys. I will look at the distance between the apex of these triangles is, of course, 6 1/4. That's what we said. Now, I like the piano keys approximately 1 inch apart. And if you look at the stitching, I also like to make a nice wide space and then a narrow piano keys. Use your imagination if you want to do this a little bit differently. You don't have to have 1 inch in between. You can have them all equal distant. I recommend you draw it out on a piece of graph paper and see what it looks like beforehand. If I have 5 of these in between, that means the center of each piano key is 1 1/4 inches. Now, if I want to mark that out, then I will right here. So that gives me, there's a center of a piano key, and there's a center, and there, and then I finish here. The thing I'm going to do is I am going to draw this on, and that just take me a moment here. It's just to make the 1/4 inch stitch lines. It's 1/8 of an inch to either side of that center mark. That's a model of what it's going to look like. When we do the feathers, we're going to start at the center, and we're going to draw feathers like here and here, and we do a little backtrack, and then we do another one, and then we do the center one and a little backtrack, and then we go back down the other side, and we stitch back over, and we do the final feather here and end up at the center again. So that's going to be our feather pattern. So let's go take a look at the stitching. Notice the ruler I'm using, I've marked with electrical tape so I know where the 6 1/4 inches wide is. And I also inserted straight pins at each one of the marks. I'm using an air erasable marker, so those marks will fade after I get the stitching done. Now I'm marking all the way along here, as you can see, and I remove the pins as I go or readjust them. See, I just readjusted one there because it was off by a hair, and that will not be noticeable once you get the stitching complete. This marker I'm using is a little bit faded, but it's still enough that I can see it. Alright, now I have that marked all the way along, and now I am stitching it, and I just use my straight edge ruler again to stitch right on top of that line. And remember, the edge of the foot to the needle is 1/4 inch, and it's okay if it's off by a few threads. Again, this is not an exact science, and it will show just fine. And now I am stitching the 1/4 inch echo line, and the edge of this foot just needs to follow along the stitching right here, and keep the ruler there. You can slide it along so that it supports the foot the whole way. And just when you come here, stop there and just travel up the other triangle like that. And continue the whole distance along. That's really fun to do. I enjoy doing that work. Now, here's where we mark the piano key centers, 1 1/4 inch each. Again, with an air erasable marker, 1 1/4 inch, and those are the centers of the piano keys. So mark that the whole distance along. I just mark as I go because sometimes they fade before you get to them. Then I just mark a straight line. I'm using that as a right angle so I know my line is straight. And just mark the center. I don't mark both sides of the piano key stitches. I just mark the center. And then do that the whole way along. I only mark as I go because air erasable markers sometimes fade very quickly, and if you take a little while to stitch each one of the piano keys, the mark could be faded by the time you get to it. So I don't do the entire width, I just do as I go. Okay, and then what you want to do is start here, stitch down, travel along this line so that it's hidden. So you're stitching over top of that previous line. Stop there. That's going to give you 1/4 inch between this line and the needle, and travel back up. Pivot your ruler, come across to the next one, and keep going. Now when you get to the one at the very point, stop at that echo line, pivot, stitch up to the point, and then pivot again and stitch down until you're at your 1/4 inch, and come up to the top again. And just keep stitching that the whole way along. You can also use the marks on the ruler to line them up against a previous stitching line right there. That's what I was doing there. It helps you keep it in the right place, and that ended up about 1/8 of an inch between the stitch line and the piano key center. And stop with your foot right there, travel up the other way. Just keep going the whole distance. They're very quick. This is the feather. It's free motion. You backtrack at the top of that one. I know when I'm doing these, they look a little sloppy, but after you get the whole quilt done, they look really nice, and nobody sees them. No one notices that they're a little bit of variation in the size of them. I'm using a water erasable marker to mark a scroll guideline along the deep rose border, because I just found I needed a guideline to get the scrolls evenly spaced. The ruler I'm using is a scallop ruler, and I just alternated it up and down all the whole way along. And then I just free motion the scroll while following that scroll line that I marked. After I've got the scroll line completely stitched, I need a damp cloth to remove the water erasable marker. I found the air erasable marker was not dark enough to see it against the rose fabric. That's why I used the water erasable. And that's the finished border. I think it looks really nice. Here is one more bit of detail I wanted to show you, which is how I turned the corner. Our triangle zigzag line stopped here, and it connects to the one on the other side or edge of the quilt. So this forms a straight line along. Our 1/4 inch echo line comes right across. Draw a diagonal line from this corner out to the very corner of the border, and then stitch along that. When you do the piano keys across, keep measuring them 1 1/4 inch centers, and when you join them in the corners, bring them across like this in a nice square. And that's how the Spring Roses quilt is finished on the corner. Thank you so much for buying me coffees and sending me tips. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more great videos. Happy quilting!